Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Martin Warner, founder and CEO of autonomous flight and aviation-focused R&D firm pioneering electric urban air mobility, or flying taxis. Martin believes flying taxis is a big tech trend of 2023. Martin, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you got it. And why are flying taxis the tech trend to watch in 2023?
Well, I think the media's already covered it a lot because it's starting to become of consumer interest. In fact, I'd say of major consumer interest. One of the reasons is that it has the opportunity to transform the commuting landscape, right? The idea of an aircraft slash drone going across the cities and being able to kind of humanize the commuting landscape or the topography of what we live in. Notwithstanding, it's had $7 billion of global capital. I was the first UK company to enter the race. There's now 160 companies coming into this space. And now we're starting to see prototypes and concepts of what these aircraft will look like. And so now there's a lot more to talk about. It's becoming a lot more real.
Yep, and we're just showing some pretty cool B-roll here. And this is autonomous flight revealing your latest eVTOL aircraft, the Y6S Plus. Tell us more about that.
Sure. Well, so 7 years ago, I started out building a two-seater to test the technologies. And that thing would only fly for about 12 and a half minutes. Years later, about 3.5 years later, we've come up with the Y6S Plus. So we believe this is the typical aircraft slash drone or eVTOL aircraft that will enter service. And it's got some similarities with our competitors. But the most important thing is that we're releasing, I think, addressing and releasing some of the things that regulators will want. First of all, that has to be a lot more safer and has to be more redundancy in the aircraft. So we're adding a ballistic chute in case of emergency situations. We're addressing the noise issue. A lot of people are concerned with 400, 500, 1,000 feet. How loud are these aircraft going to be, given we're going to have so many more in the city? So we believe we've come up with a proprietary use to reduce the noise of these aircraft. We've got a flexible, agile design. We don't care about going to Paris or going to Canada. We care about just operating within the city. As a result of that, we've got a smaller aircraft, therefore increasing the departure and arrival landing locations, which I think is going to be key. But it's all about passenger safety. This is the key thing that we've focused on. And we've done that from a variety of different ways, from looking at how we manage batteries and many other things that are in our latest round of patents.
How does this compare with other models being developed by your competitors?
Well, so first of all, let's very briefly kind of define it as three categories. It takes about $100 million to test an aircraft. So if you commit to a design, you're done. In other words, you're not going to start continuing to innovate. You're going to execute on the model you've got. So a lot of the companies that you see out there, I won't go and name all my competitors, but they're committed to their limitations. They're also committed to the opportunity, and that's great. There are other companies that are just too early to tell. They've got to go through and file their patents. And then you've got companies like us that are balancing our innovation with what we think the horizon for certification will be. And in doing that, we're able to maximize what we think that innovation landscape is. What are those areas? It's how do we manage and store and retain our battery density and energy for the aircraft? How do we deal with flexible use? So how do we get more than just passenger commuting out of these aircraft? Can we use them for cargo? Can we use them for emergency medevac? We can with ours because we have a flexible cabin. You know, how are we going to deal with some of the regulators' concerns? So again, you have to make some fundamental choices around noise. All of these things are important. Another area where we differ on is how we think air traffic management is going to take place inside this window. And again, we've built our aircraft to take on board those considerations.
And Martin, that was my next question to you. What are some of the challenges around flying taxis? I mean, I have a number of questions. How do you manage that with urban planning? Does the infrastructure exist? You know, clearly this could go very wrong if it's not managed properly.
Yeah, well, one thing for sure is the regulator will take their time and it won't go wrong. If we look at what's happened with trains, if we look at what's happened with jetliners in the sky, they're going to be extremely cautious, and rightly so. But number one is passenger safety. Number one. The other areas are going to be technology reliability. You mentioned urban landscape planning. This is huge in terms of where we want these aircraft to take off from. How are we going to deal with the approach to these landing spots? Are they going to take over greenfield sites? Are they going to be assigned next to rivers like, say, the Hudson or the East River, using perhaps places like where helipads were and stuff like that? We're going to deal with kind of what I call the scale and reliability of flight testing. There's going to be thousands and thousands of hours of testing. And that in of itself is going to be a regulatory problem. And then the big one is going to be outside our own concerns for the aircraft. It's going to be air traffic management. We're going to have to plug in to this multi-billion-dollar system that keeps us all very safe in the air. And we call that the air traffic management process. Those are the 5 areas that we're focused on. The good news is the FAA are on board and they'd like to see this happen. And even though it's hard to get us all aligned in terms of getting the dialogue consistent, they're very much on board. And that's good to see.
Of course, this all comes down to scalability when you think of cost, right? How much do you envision this costing to take a flight from Center City, London to, a more suburban area, if you will?
Well, keep in mind that there's two areas, right? There's what the media is calling air taxis, and this is within the city, right? So 12 minutes, JFK to Manhattan or whatever, right? This is great. And then you've got others that are saying, well, you know what, we can push the speed and the distance, and we can go up to Westchester, we can go up to Boston, and that's a different model. That's a light jets, that's helicopters, that's really not the space that we occupy. And I actually think the technology is not really there today to do that. But look, I think there's plenty of opportunity to figure out how these aircraft can address this question. Fundamentally, it's going to come down to the economic cost of the choices for some of the key technologies. Very simply, it can't be done on the price of a lot of the aircraft today. So, for instance, they're talking about 3-4 million an aircraft. We've come out with 2.2 million. You've got to be near that 2 million point if you're going to offer the end consumer the cost of a high-end Uber fare. That's what we're looking for. That's the goal.
And finally, Martin, to wrap up here, as well as flying taxis, drones are becoming increasingly common in our skies. What's the potential there? Well,
so over the next 20 to 30 years, as a kind of enthusiastic futurist, I think this is one of the big trends that you're going to see, and tons of innovations. And as Steve Jobs said, he couldn't see maps or foresee maps happening on the iPhone. What we can see, and one of my other companies, we can certainly see parcel drones, right, delivering products from Amazon into your front or backyard. That is happening. There is testing licenses by the FAA in UK, in the CAA, in France. We're all looking at that happening and becoming a near reality in the next year. So that's significant, but we're going to see all kinds of products and services entering the skies because of eVTOL services. A lot of them will start out in the area of surveillance, city security, looking for engineering topography, further filmmaking, looking for transport surveillance, emergency situation surveillance. All of that is a given, but there's still going to be so many other opportunities to use this set of technologies.
All right, Martin, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.